really none of your business. It's none of my business.
Hello, Fáilte, good evening, everyone. It is Liam Printer here from the Motivated Classroom podcast. Today is day 24 of the August Spotlight, where we're looking at 31 of the interviews that we've had on the Motivated Classroom in 31 days. And today is one of those extended, special, long episodes I did with Jason, Fritze and Alina Filipescu for the CI Reboot back in 2022. And just so many amazing things to take out of here. Like, one was just the passion that both Alina and Jason spoke with. You just wanted to be in their class. So some of the nice things that I thought that Alina said, for example, she talked a lot about the importance of community and connection, and that ties in a lot with some of what previous guests have spoken about as well on this August Spotlight. And she said, if the goal is to build community, if we don't have community, if we're not connected to the students, then it's hard to stay in the target language and give messages and expect students to understand and be part of it. My goal is acquisition for the entire year. And in order to build that in the students, I need to use target language and I need to use it as much as possible. So this whole episode was about target language use and staying in the target language as much as we can. And then Jason spoke about communication, saying, it's impossible for them to engage in communication when they don't understand. Incomprehensible language is not communication. Communication begins with the first message, the first words. How about the first question? And he just gave that example of, it doesn't really matter what it is, but like, do you like sushi? And he's like, I don't, I hate it. But it gives you something to talk about immediately. Getting to know them, that's always a goal he has every day. And I want to learn something new about at least one of my students today. And I love that. That's a really good way to keep it student-centered. And he says, I'm always about asking my students, am I learning something new about them today? Are they learning something new about each other or about me? Are we building community? So that part was really, really nice. They both spoke then in a bit of detail about when they use English. And they spoke about the fact that they'd use it for new directions or new activities that they've never done before. But then the next time they do it, it would always be in the target language just to make sure it was comprehensible. And I would do something similar, but I'd kind of translate it back and forth. I'd say it in Spanish, then I'd say it in English, then I'd say it in Spanish, then English. But the next time I wouldn't do it. And then, about students inputting in English or getting involved in English in the conversations. And I thought it was interesting what Alina said here. She was saying, I don't force them to talk if they're not ready, but the minute they go to English, it is distracting. It's distracting to the students who are in the class. Yes, they might have better ideas and interesting ideas, but the English is distracting. And then the students start like a chain reaction and it's hard to break that. And I would agree with her there. It's quite hard when someone is so enthusiastic and they throw something out in English and then someone else says something in English. To break that can be a challenge. I usually just let it go for about 20 seconds and then I'll stop it and say, okay, that's enough. And then we're back in the target language. And then Jason talked about using English purposefully, quickly, and in a very limited way. And he has this nice idea where he asks students permission to speak English, and Alina does this too. And then often the students will say, no, you can't speak English. And he's like, but it's really important and I need to explain this thing. They're like, no. And of course, that gives him more opportunity for input. And they were saying that when they meet students outside class, they typically communicate in Spanish because that's just what they do. And I love that. Jason then gave us the idea of a word wall, which is nothing new. Like, many of us would have lots of stuff up on our walls. But his kind of thing was about his word wall is built throughout the year, depending on the stories, the narratives, the characters they're building. And his word wall will look very different to mine, which will look different to Alina's. And I thought that was really nice, that basically, he says, I like to have my students are growing in the language and that we're communicating through personal questions and answers, stories and characters. So maybe the stories and the characters underneath them or underneath that big poster on the wall, I'll start to add more words, the words that they're hearing. And I create a word wall over time from week to week. Not as a list of words, but these are words you've already heard, you've begun to acquire, and that provides the literacy piece. It works beautifully, and a lot of teachers have been doing it. And that's a nice idea. I have a digital version of that, where my students every week, at the end of, usually it's at the beginning of the week, and they think about previous week. So they do some retrieval practice and try and recall words from the previous week, and they add them to a Google Doc. But actually, having some of them up on the walls is actually really nice as like something really visual, and they can be seeing that throughout the year. And then there's this nice part where Alina was talking about grammar and that she basically just does all of her grammar in the last 3 weeks to kind of prepare them for the next stage. She says, I do grammar at the end of the year in 8th grade for about 3 weeks. We work on verb conjugations, students make a little verb fan, and they take it to high school. let me just tell you, when they get to their high school classes, their comprehension is very high, their output is amazing for many of them, and their grammar skills, well, they can conjugate, they know how to do it because we did it right at the end of the year. And it's better than the students who focus on grammar for the entire year. And there's research studies showing that Dr. Lichtman has spoken about, actually. And finally, then we spoke about, what about students zoning out? Like if you're speaking in the target language all the time, and often teachers will say this to me, do they not just zone out and glazes over them? And Alina says they shouldn't zone out if it's comprehensible, if it's compelling and contextualized. I make sure they don't zone out by giving them something to do, classroom jobs, like holding up rejoinder signs. Students in the front have different color cards and they have question words. So when I use that question, the student who has it has to show me it on their card. And then, that's just lots of different classroom jobs keeps them constantly engaged because their job could come up at any time. So they're constantly listening for that. And she says, I need to see that engagement visibly. So we do gestures or cards or mini whiteboards. So that was episode 92 with Alina and Jason. I definitely recommend you go back and listen to it. The passion that both of those educators speak with is really infectious and a great thing to listen to right before the start of this new school year. Go check it out. Hasta mañana.